Hello, my name is Paul Sandrock, ACTFL Director of Education. Welcome to this webinar, which is part of ACTFL's response to this rapid move to teaching and learning remotely. ACTFL thanks all of you for the tremendous effort you are putting forth, staying focused on your learners and finding creative ways to support them during these challenging times. Today's webinar is led by Lauren Rosen. Lauren directs the University of Wisconsin Collaborative Language Program, overseeing a blended learning model combining video conferencing and web technologies to provide students across the university system with access to languages that would not be available to them through face-to-face instruction. So Lauren has a lot of experience supporting language educators in online environments. Let's get to today's topic, Emergency Remote Instruction, ERI, how to pace learning and check for understanding. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Paul. And thank all of you for coming today to this webinar. I'm sure all of you out there have experienced the unexpected, whether it's small children invading your space or disruptions from outside noises, disruptions on your students' ends. There's a lot of that going on, and it can be very overwhelming. We're in a situation where some days are definitely tougher than other days, and we're all juggling lots of different balls at one time, whether it's a personal, professional, and otherwise. So I don't know what your day is today. But I do want to find out a little bit about that. So I'm actually going to switch over to a Mentimeter. And what this is going to do is allow me to get some feedback from you. Now, if you prefer not to participate, that's fine. But for those of you who want to participate as a student, you can. This screen here describes what you need to do. So you can simply grab your phone, or if you want to open up a new browser window, and go to menti.com, and then you can type in this code, and there's 3 questions there. This is a tool that I really like to use. A lot of my instructors use it. It works both synchronously and asynchronously. So right now we have a synchronous environment. However, I actually did set it up so that the 3 questions that I have for you are going to come to you each in a row. You do have the ability to tell it that it's instructor controlled to go from one question to another, but for the purpose of this, I wanted you to go ahead, those who feel like participating, to go ahead and get to all 3 of those questions at your own pace, and then we'll take a look at them. Part of this is also to give you an idea of the power of Mentimeter and the different kinds of tasks that are available. And these are just a few of what's out there for kind of polling your students and getting an idea of who they are and where they are and what's happening with them today. So I'm gonna go over here and see. So it's good to see that a lot of you have gotten past the frustrated and overwhelmed state, and you're getting to the point of sort of making your way and figuring out what that new normal is gonna look like for you. And some of you seem to be even excited about it, and I'm glad to see that, especially because the next question, and this I think is one of the most interesting ones to see. I think a lot of us received information probably at some point on teaching in a distance environment, and you just kind of pushed it aside because you thought, well, that's not really something I need to worry about now. And then all of a sudden we got into this emergency situation, and it would have been really helpful to have done that. So let's see what silver linings some of you might have come up with. So some of you are seeing that you're getting more daily feedback to your students. Students have been much more communicative. Somebody I saw earlier, as this scrolls, somebody said that your districts are paying for more of your professional development, and that's certainly an improvement, because they're starting to realize there is a lot more to learn than what you had been doing. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of these that are coming through, and it's really great that you've found ways to engage with your kids and explore culture and so forth. So I'm excited to see that. And some of you have started using technologies that you wouldn't have otherwise used. And I hope that what you're learning now and what you're doing now that's working well for you will be things that you'll consider continuing to do when you go back to face-to-face. This next question just kind of gives me an idea of what people are using. It looks like Google Classroom, so that seems to be one of the most common ones. Not super surprised about that. And then there's a lot of learning management systems out there. And then some of you are using other options. Well, I don't have time to take feedback on exactly what those other options are. Everything that you're going to see today can be embedded or used or linked to from whatever system you're using. Okay, so what I want to hit on here is that whether you're teaching in an emergency remote instruction type of environment or you're teaching face-to-face, what we know about pedagogy still holds. And hopefully now that you've been doing this for maybe 2, 3, or 4 weeks or however long it's been, you're starting to be able to take a breath and really look back at those tools that you already have pedagogically and think about how you can use them. So as many of you I'm sure know, that we start with backwards design. We want to start with the end in mind. And that's going to help us really determine what it is students need to learn, what is essential. And right now, with the kind of environment we're in, I think it's become even more important that we really focus on the essential pieces, because we have to give our students also the time that they need for other things going on in their life in a way that we haven't had to as much before, we haven't spent as much time focusing on before. If you jumped into this thinking, well, I'm just going to take my face-to-face stuff and I'm going to put it online and that's, I'll just figure it out. You may have at this point realized that perhaps that's not the best approach. So if we start with the end in mind and we think about, ultimately I want to end up with a plate of cookies. And that plate of cookies, all of the cookies are going to have the same ingredients in them, but they're not all going to look exactly alike. And that's kind of what I would say your students' products are going to be like in the end. So you're going to give them all of the ingredients that they need, and they're going to have the ability to create with it. They're going to have the ability to show you what they know and can do in the target language, and not everything's going to look identical. And you can let go of always having to assign the exact same thing to all of your students. Your job will be to give them the rubrics, give them the idea of what they need to know, and then let them show you what they know in their own way. So that's kind of where this is going. And keep in mind that these are just generally good pedagogical approaches, whether you're teaching face-to-face, online, blended, whatever it is. So think about what those essential learning outcomes are and focus on those, and not how you had planned in your curriculum to integrate them. So one of the ways to sort of figure out what those essential pieces are is to go back to your can-do statements. And if you're not familiar with these, they're available on the ACTFL website, and it's a great place to start. I just took an intermediate mid one as, to sort of demonstrate it, but what do you do with this can-do statement? What's the next step? So you're going to be taking this this function of what you want your students to be able to do, and you have to put it into a communicative context. And you may have originally had a context for that in your curriculum, but that context may change now. It may change now because you want to make it relevant to your students' lives, and their lives have changed now just as yours. So in this particular case, we have a structure to express a preference. And when you want to express a preference, there's certain probably grammar that students will need to know. They will need to demonstrate this in a communicative way. And there will be some vocabulary items so that they can say that they prefer or don't prefer something. The place to be flexible here is on that vocabulary part. It's important that they know how to say what they prefer, but it's less important whether they're telling you whether they prefer one profession over another profession versus being able to say they prefer face-to-face instruction over the online instruction they have to do now, or whatever your topic is. But I want to encourage you to sort of rethink those topics. In the end, if your students didn't get to the textbook chapter or the theme of professions, it's okay. Keeping in mind that over the summer, they lose 25 to 30% of what they learned during the school year anyway. So, you know, if they lost some vocabulary, that's stuff that gets recycled back in. It's more important, in my opinion, to really focus on those key elements, the essential structures that you wanted them to know, and whatever vocabulary gets plugged into that is fine. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to take this one concept at a time, but we need to set some ground rules for that. And what I mean by ground rules is if you have a text that you've been using, what affordances does that offer you? Okay, so if your text, for example, has online videos or online self-check activities, go ahead and use those. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Start with what you already have and expand upon that. If you are going to do some creating on your own, or you think that you need to because you don't have text that offers that, do a search on the web, but set a time limit. Spend, 25 or 30 minutes to find the content that you're looking for. And if you don't find it, then it's time to create it yourself. Otherwise, you'll find that you'll have spent 2 hours going down a rabbit hole and you'll not come up with what you're really looking for. So remember, it doesn't matter how your students learn the content. It matters that they learn the content. So that's what you're sort of aiming for here. If you identify an explanation that's in your text, you can use that. Or you can just write up the explanation yourself, and you can post that to your web page, whatever it is that you're using for your students. Or better yet, a combination. So giving your students multiple means of learning something. If there's a video that explains it, if there's a spot in the textbook that you can refer them to, if you want to write up an explanation, if you find a chart or an explanation on the web for it, linking and adding all of those pieces in so students can learn in whatever ways they're most comfortable with is really essential at this time, because you don't have your students are all learning in different ways, and you don't know what way is going to work best for them. And we have found through my program, which has been doing this for a long time, that some students use all of the approaches that you provide them with, and some really focus on just reading it or just watching a video, depending on their learning style. So this really meets those needs. I also really encourage you to share with your colleagues wherever possible. There's no reason to be reinventing the wheel. And when I say your colleagues, there's the colleagues in your department, and that's great. But you may also you may be the only Chinese teacher at your school, for example, or you may not have a great relationship with your colleagues in your department. Whatever the situation is, if you have a colleague that's 5 states away, that's fine too. Share. Split up the work, make it easy. The idea is to work smarter, not harder. So whatever you can do to make that happen, I would highly encourage you to do. So how are we going to do this? There's a variety of technologies to create your own, if that's where you end up headed. I'm going to show you some pretty quick examples. keep in mind that whatever you're going to be doing in, say, a video instruction should be no more than 5 to 8 minutes maximum in instruction. Some of the materials are already out there. If they're longer than that, really take a look at it and see if you really want to share such a long video. If you're creating it yourself, try and keep it in that shorter time frame. Here's a quick example of a Chinese instruction that's
大家好. In this lesson, we will introduce the way to express besides or in addition to in Chinese.
Okay, so this lesson goes through and I'm just going to kind of jump a bit ahead. It has a number of different slides in it. It's all of 3.5 minutes long. And that really is sort of perfect timing in that it doesn't need to be a super long video. So if I jump ahead a little bit, you can kind of see where this is going. And it sort of unfolds the grammatical learning and explains it so that the students have the ability to understand what it is that they need to do. When the video ends, then you provide students with some form of a concept check, some way to know whether or not they understood what happened here. And that can come in multiple formats. I'm going to show you some examples of that in a few minutes. But the fact that you really only need 3.5 minutes to teach a single concept. So you can break things down shorter. If you happen to be a PowerPoint user and you've never tried this before, this is a sample of a PowerPoint. This is Arabic. And in this particular structure that this teacher wanted to share with her students, it took only 4 slides to do it. This video shows you how you can do a voiceover, a PowerPoint. So that might be, if you're a PowerPoint user, that might be the easiest way to go. You may even already have PowerPoint for some of your lessons. It's about 2 seconds long, 3 seconds long. So I'll leave that there. All of the resources that are linked within this slide presentation, you will have access to, and all of the links will be there. So you can click on these later if you want to check that out. This final one that I want to show you, Flipgrid, is something that I've seen used quite a bit lately, and it's been showing up in a lot of the communities in ACTFL as a suggested tool. One of the new features of Flipgrid is the ability to create a screencast. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up. There we go. And I want to show you just quickly what it looks like. So this particular one, this is a Japanese instructor that I work with, Magara Maeda, and she happens to be focusing on preferences. So she wanted her students to to learn how to tell whether they liked online learning or face-to-face learning better and why. And she did a screencast to explain the topic, and this is what it looks like in Flipgrid.
皆さん、こんにちは。ここは東京スカイツリー。はい、じゃあ皆さん。私は
As she goes through and explains, you see that there's this red writing here. She's able to annotate on the slides as she's giving her lesson. So that's really handy. She's kept it to 4.5 minutes for explaining the lesson. And then after each lesson, there are 2 things that happen. The students have the ability to do their Q&A about the lesson in Flipgrid below. And she also adds in a speaking task to it so that they can demonstrate their level of understanding. Then the following day, she has them doing activities where they have to listen to each other, and in some cases they're responding in Flipgrid, and I'm going to show you in a minute some examples of some other things that you can do to have students connecting to each other. They do say that they have found that they have a stronger community as a result of these kinds of activities in Flipgrid. Some of them really do like the face-to-face aspects of learning, but a lot of them are also discovering that they're really enjoying some of the affordances that they've been getting with the online integrations that a lot of the instructors are starting to use. Oh, yeah. Okay. So when we talk about these concept checks that I've mentioned briefly in the past, there are many, many ways to do them. As I mentioned earlier, your textbook may have some built in, so I would encourage you to look at those, of course, because that's just an easy, quick way to start. If there's content out there that you find, a lot of them might be self-check. So here, for example, this is a Spanish example from Lazarillo de Tormes, which if you're teaching AP, this might be something that's useful to you. It has these built-in activities that are self-check. It allows the students to repeat them as many times as they want to practice. Here's another one where they read this paragraph, and then when they want to take the test, they have to figure out which words go where. And then in the end, there's a writing task here, which they can email to their instructor. So this is just a website that I happen to find online. It's not, connected to a particular class or a person that I know that created it. But these are the kinds of resources that are out there and available to you that you could simply just integrate into your course without any issues. So that's one example. This down here, this is a Chinese quizzes. If you've never used quizzes, though, I think that's another one that I've seen come up a number of times in the ACTFL communities. This is another way, kind of like Quizlet, to check your knowledge. So the students can practice with it. They can play the game live, or they can, you can do it asynchronously also. So that's an option. If you don't want to use technology, I still encourage you to connect to your students in some way and their knowledge. These two examples, one in French and one in German, were actually shared, I believe it was last week, by Laura Lomaika, who teaches French, if I'm not mistaken. And these were in one of her presentations. So in this case, it's kind of a survey of students. So if they've learned a particular structure, you can start testing their knowledge of their use of it, but first survey them, and then you can get into some interpersonal communication tasks, just like you would in a face-to-face class. So if you're not a French speaker, this first one, students are supposed to list, for example, the last item that they ate, the last movie that they watched, the last emoji that they used. So that gives you, that's really connecting to what the kinds of things that they're probably doing right now. This one down here that's in German, I can cook and sing and so forth, and they have to check off how well they can do that. Then by sharing these items with the student body at large in your classes, that's where you can create some of those more interactive activities where students have to find someone who, for example, or any of those kinds of things that you normally would do in a face-to-face class. It can be done in a remote environment by just sort of reworking how that activity would look. If you have a learning management system or a website that you're using with your students, there's also using Quizlet. That's another one of the tools. So in this particular case, which is Russian, the students are supposed to practice these Russian words and match them with their locations, and as soon as they can do it in 20 seconds or faster, then they come down here, and this is where the speaking practice comes in. This happens to be an embedded H5P activity created by Natalia Roberts, who is a professor that I work with, and basically they just push to say the word for whatever it was that they learned up here that's now down here, so that they can practice. And each one of these bumps is a different example of that, so she can actually get some speaking input from them and check how their speaking is. When you're creating those videos for your students, if you do decide to create some videos on your own, it's okay to ask students to pause and repeat words, even though they're kind of talking to themselves. It's okay to do that. And so if your video, rather than being 5 to 8 minutes, ends up being slightly longer because you have pauses and interactivity in there, that's fine. What you don't want is a talking head for, 20 minutes. So in fact, what we're doing right now, in my opinion, would be really bad language pedagogy. Because your students can't maintain that focus for that long. And the other part about breaking your lessons into chunks and concept checks is that also gives your students really good breaking points, so that when they need to stop because they have to go help their little sister, or they need to take the dog for a walk, or whatever it is that they need to do, it gives them good breaking points for that. So keeping things shorter is really the way to go. Another way to look at these are, I call them mashups. And that's where you take all of these pieces and you can put it into essentially a single page. Wiser is one of the, I guess you would call it, worksheet creators that I've seen posted a lot also to the ACTFL communities. And I'm just going to show you an example here. This one is in German. And you'll see there's a video in there, and then there's follow-up activities. So here's a video. Students watch the video, and then they practice with the vocabulary, and this is a matching exercise based on what they saw in the video. That is then followed by some more vocabulary exercises that are sorting, and then a fill in the blank, and then a paragraph answer, or they can use their voice to answer. So this is sort of a digital worksheet that allows students to do both text and voice. And also it has all of the elements of that self-check that you're looking for in a video, or in any kind of input that you're giving your students to see how they're learning. In the end, let me scroll down to the bottom, when they go to hand in work, it can either, this integrates with Google Classroom, for those of you who are Google Classroom users. It can also be emailed to you. So there's different ways that you can receive it. It's really set up for parents or for teachers and students. It is freemium. So there's a certain amount of it that can be free. And then if you want some other benefits, then you have to pay for it. And that's how a lot of these things are. In the fully free realm, if you haven't seen HyperDocs, that's basically just a Google Doc that you format in such a way that it takes the students all the way through a lesson. It chunks it into parts. So you can see in this lesson, first was the engagement. There's a video here. Then they explore some more, and there's some articles related to the topic in Spanish. And then there's a part where they look at photos and they're going to talk about those photos. And then there's a Quizlet to check their knowledge. Then they do some reflection and some extension. So you've got a full lesson basically in a page right there. And all of these are clickable links out to the resources that are needed in order to complete that lesson. If you have if you haven't seen ThingLink before, it's really a wonderful tool for putting any kind of text, link, video onto a canvas, essentially. And you can even embed a Google Forms quiz to check for comprehension of the content. So this one happens to be in English. And all of these are links to more information. And if I clicked here, it would take me to an article. So we have those. There are several of them in here. You can add audio, you can add video. So if I scroll down here, there's some videos in here that the students can click on to learn the information. And you can, this one was really nice where they have the discover here, explore some more here, how much did you understand? And in the end, this is where it actually links to a Google form that can work. I think this is a Google form. In any case, it links to a form that's a quiz. Yes, it is. That's a quiz that students can show you how much they learned from their experience with all of the content on this page. So you can do kind of a lesson in a poster, if you will. And then the final one that I want to show you, and this is a Russian example again, and this is in a course management system where you can keep things a little bit more simple if you want. So here's a grammar explanation at the top, followed by a video. And in this video, there are pop-up questions. So each of these little bubbles, this is another H5P sort of thing. Each of these bubbles will bring up a different type of question sequence. And there's a lot of different options in here that you can use. That is then followed by, this is something called learning apps, another type of technology that you can easily use to create sort of fill in the blanks and matching and summary. There's a lot of different activities there. This is all free. In both of these cases, these are set up to be self-check. So if you're doing something that's self-check, you can choose to then create something that's that gets submitted to you also, and you can do that in a number of ways. Google Forms is one of the easiest, since I know a lot of you are Google users. This particular one, Learning Apps, does have a back end that will allow you to get the analytic information out of it. That is also free, but you probably would need a tech person to help you figure out how to do that within a learning management system. So there's a variety of tools out there that you can use, whatever way it is that you want to get that feedback from your students. It's really important because that's what's going to help you determine areas that students are confused on, where they're struggling, and it will inform your instruction then. Okay. So what are 4 ingredients for a successful emergency remote instruction lesson? Connection. You want to connect to your students and connect to them and who they are today and what their experiences and world is like today. They need that connection for multiple reasons. They need the socialization because they're really getting tired at looking at their family. They need to see somebody else. And they need an outlet for that. And they need an outlet to talk about their experience. So now more than ever, that connection is important. Also bringing in some sense of humor or joy. Even if they're only paying attention to whatever it is in your content for 15 minutes in a day, if that 15 minutes is something that's joyful and fun and puts a smile on their face, they're gonna wanna come back for more. So I really encourage you to find ways to add in humor. Modeling. It's extra important to be very specific and very clear on all of your instructions to your students at all times, and provide them with models of what you're looking for when they're producing something, so they have an idea of what they're aiming for. And finally, physical engagement. Anything that you can do to get them physically engaged in the content is better. So whether it's in a synchronous session, for example, and you're saying, okay, everybody go find something soft, or everybody go find your favorite thing that's sitting on your bed, or what's in your closet, whatever it is, have them get up, move, bring it back, and then talk about it using whatever structures it is that they've practiced before. or learned previously or are learning now, so that it connects to what they have today. And they really do come up with some interesting elements. I'm going to share just a little bit of this video here. This is Yo Azama and his group of Japanese instructors. He shared this with me and I thought it was fabulous. They have a really good cohort of Japanese instructors that together have created lessons. And they're having fun with it, and I suspect that the students are having fun and enjoying participating in these lessons. So I'm going to jump through a little bit of this so you can just kind of see it. Even if you don't understand Japanese, you'll get what's going on.
ギリギリおにぎりの時間がやってきました。司会を務めさせていただきます。西村美代と申します。よろしくお願いします。
こちらの豆の煮込みを作ってみました。こちらの圧力鍋。
おー、フリホレスコンアロスですね、先生。さすがでございます。ありがとうございます。いいですね。お、何か。
にちょっとした、メキシコのチーズ。
Okay, so it's obviously a cooking contest where three of the instructors are competing to make a common Japanese dish. And then in the end, the students can watch this video, and then in the end they have a Google form that they fill out with some questions that is not only just demonstrating their understanding of the content, but it also connects to them in asking them if they were to make this particular food, what would they add to theirs? And then they also are invited to actually try and make it and take a picture of it or do a drawing of it and post that. So there's different ways that you can get products from them that show that they've engaged in your content. But what I really love about this and all of the videos that they've used is how animated they are and the sense of humor that they're using, because all of us need to find a little bit of joy today.
Lauren, if I can just jump in while you're talking about what makes for a successful emergency remote instruction lesson. Some really great questions are coming in, and one of the overarching elements is, how do you gauge what all goes into a lesson? Some people, as you said, have maybe a 30-minute session of synchronous face-to-face time. Others, it's all simply individual tasks that they are posting, and they're trying to make sure that there's some learning. They know they're probably more maintaining than adding a lot of new knowledge, but they want to make sure that the students have a valuable experience. So can you give a sense of how you start to decide what goes into that lesson, whole class, individual, etc.?
Okay, so that's a really great question. And in some ways, less is more. And I don't mean that in the sense of what you provide them to learn the concepts that they need, whatever it is essential. As far as that part goes, as I said earlier, making sure that you have multiple modes of instruction so students can learn in multiple ways. That's kind of the first step. And then to go through and make sure that you're hitting all modes of communication at some point in your lesson, just like you would in a face-to-face lesson, coming up with different ways to do that. As far as, length of lesson, there is a lot of variety out there right now, and some people are getting more guidance than others from their districts about the expectations. What's most important is that concept check at the end so you know where your students are. If you can plan a week in advance or even 2 weeks in advance, then you can really be paying attention as the students are learning to what it is that they're struggling with, and you're not, flying by the seat of your pants like you were at the beginning, that you're able to actually address those issues and slow things down as you need to. When I say less is more, what I mean is you don't have to assess every single thing that your students do. there's room for them to just be practicing, just like they do in a face-to-face class. So when you design your lessons, you can have the primary content, and then you can have a variety of practice and self-check types of activities, whatever it is that you find, if there's items available for you and or what you want to create, but don't kill yourself trying to create new stuff. And have, if you can, 2 or 3 maybe activities for students to practice the concept with, and then 1 activity that they're turning in that shows you how well they understood. So that's how I would do it, is just giving them lots of practice, just like you would in a classroom, but maybe not as many different ways as you would in a classroom, because they're now doing it online and their time is a little bit more limited.
That's really, really helpful. I'm hearing that whole reference to good pedagogy is good pedagogy. And you've taken us through how might you make sure that they get some practice, but then you're doing some checks of learning, some formative assessments, and then a summative assessment that is less teacher constricted, right? It seems like it's a little more open, because one of the other threads in the conversation, the questions coming in, is keeping students' engagement high, not just always low-level tasks, especially challenging when I'm at the elementary level or with really, really novice learners. So any advice with that? That's a huge question, but how to keep the engagement high and have that variety of practice, formative, summative, and especially at the novice level.
So keeping the engagement high, a lot of that comes with both connecting to their lives right now and adding humor in. And actually, this is a really good segue to the next part that I want to hit on, as far as how we connect with students today, and what's going on in their world. And hopefully this will answer the question, but there are a gazillion memes out there right now related to COVID-19. And there's no reason why we can't have students creating those memes, for example, in the target language. That's something that they laugh at and spend some time with every day when they're not on our class doing school-related tasks, or family-related tasks. A lot of them are on their phones going through TikToks, for example, or Instagram or whatever. So being able to connect to them with where they are, because in many states, you can't even really leave your house except for essential reasons, like going to the grocery store. So that sort of gets them into this space more, so why not use it for that? Another really good example, there was an internet challenge that Getty put out there about recreating famous art. So in the upper left of the screen here, this is a model. This is a friend of mine who teaches high school French in Atlanta, Natalie Etzvoglu, and she created this model from a painting that she found, or a photograph rather, that she found. And then she gave students a whole list of museums that they could research through and find a painting that meant something to them. And then they were to recreate it. And this is an example in the middle here of a recreation by one of her students of this piece of artwork. And then from there, she added on a variety of both written and spoken tasks related to what the student chose as their artwork. The beautiful thing about this type of activity is that it can also be changed by levels. So at the beginning, I mentioned something about working smarter, not harder. So if you can take a task like this and adjust the assessment that you're going to do to the level of your students. So a novice student might just list the colors that are in the artwork and the colors that were in their recreation, or they might compare what they had in a list, in more of a list format. Whereas when you get to a more advanced students, they're going to be able to write full paragraphs and tell you why they chose that painting. And maybe they chose that painting because they just happened to have all the right things to be able to recreate it, or maybe there was some greater reason, who knows, but it gives them a chance to really be creative and creating on their own. So that's one example. And there are tons of these internet challenges out there. If you haven't Googled that yet, I would highly recommend it. Some of them are really fun. This is another couple that I just want to share with you. So I'm not going to play this one, but I'll make sure that the link works in the, when you get the slides. It's the What's in Your Fridge challenge. And that particular video is a series of high school teachers that were showing what was in their fridge. And it gets really funny. Some of them start like pulling a bicycle out of their fridge or pulling a baby out of their fridge, things like that. And I shared that with Natalie, the same instructor that had done the artwork. And she knows that her students are on TikTok. She was not a TikTok user. I'm not a TikTok user, but she thought, you know, I'm going to check it out and see what I can do. So I'm going to play this little video for you of her model that she created for her students, because she's giving them the internet challenge of what's in your fridge.
Dans mon esprit tout divague, je me perds dans tes yeux. Je pense critique, crédit, créance, qui dette de l'huissier, qui assis dans la merde, qui dit amour.
Okay, so that's just a quick example, and she's using that as her model, and she's going to be having her students do the What's in Your Fridge challenge. Now, maybe, you know, you're like I am, and I know what TikTok is because I happen to have a couple of teenagers, but it's not something that I've engaged in. There's no reason why you can't ask your students, if you happen to have a student that you know is really good at these kinds of things, and have them create the model for you. This next one that I'm going to show you, this is in Portuguese. And this one, so when TikTok first came out, one of the main things that it was used for was lip syncing to songs. So here's a TikTok of a song in Portuguese. Now, if it were, depending on your level and your thinking, you might not want the English there also. You could just have your students do the target language, but here's, there we go. So you get the idea. Again, these are just quick things that students might do because that's what they're, and that's where you get that sort of engagement. There's physical activity in there. They're having fun doing it. And then you build off of that and you add in whatever sorts of concept checks or practices to build off of those. Maybe from that one, you start creating a playlist of COVID-19 best songs for the target language or something like that. Whatever it is that you would want to do, that your students can show you not only what they know, but what they're also interested in, what's making them smile just a little bit every day. So some key ideas that I hope that you got out of today's webinar, that there's multiple means of learning, and concept checks are really important. It allows your students to learn in the ways that are most useful to them. By working smarter, not harder, by not trying to take everything that you were planning to do in face-to-face and putting it all online, you're gonna lower your own anxiety level, you're gonna lower your students' anxiety level, and all in all, it's gonna be less work for you. They're going to be creating some really awesome things that you may enjoy, and hopefully you'll be finding some new ways to spice up the lessons that maybe you once did in a face-to-face class in a different way that would stick even when we go back to face-to-face. It's really important, as I said earlier, to have good models and really clear instructions, because a lot of times the students are doing this asynchronously, they're on their own, and they need to be very clear what it is that you're looking for, but also add some humor in there. Make it fun. Give them a reason to want to come back and do some more later that day or the next day. Create personal connections. So maybe you didn't get to the theme on the environment this year. That's okay. It might be more important to change up that theme and talk about what's going on in living in isolation and what it feels like, or what ways students have found to socialize instead, or whatever it is. It's okay to let go of some of those themes that you originally planned on. You can bring them back next year at some point if you want. But really getting them talking about what they're experiencing now. Good emergency remote instruction is just good pedagogy. Whether you're teaching in completely online environments, face-to-face, or blended, whatever it is, good pedagogy is really at the heart of everything. So I hope that that was helpful, maybe gave you one or two new ideas for what you might add to your lessons in the coming weeks before the end of the semester.
Lauren, it absolutely gave us many, many things to think about. And if we can ask just a couple of remaining questions. Another thread that surfaced had to do with the idea of assessment for those situations where teachers are still expected to grade. In many situations, there is no more grading, it's a pass-fail. But if they do, they're looking for some advice on assessment and obviously how to know that it's the student's own work. Kind of creating those tasks that are open enough, right? That the students are able to show what they can do.
Yeah, so that's been a recurring theme, is how do I know it's my student's own work? How do I prevent cheating in an online environment? And I have a couple of sort of ideas, I guess, around that. First off, that's where some of the self-check sorts of activities come in. If it's something that your students can just Google to answer, then they're not thinking. They're not really putting the effort in, and I wouldn't necessarily call it their work. A final assessment that truly demonstrates what they're able to do is going to require them to analyze, to synthesize, and to create in the target language, not just regurgitate. You will know from the product that they're providing you that, if it contains all kinds of structures you've never taught, or all kinds of vocabulary that they've never seen before, you're going to know that they basically tried to Google Translate the whole thing. But if they're using the language that they've been taught, and you've been seeing what they've been doing along the way, and you're providing them the kind of assessment that requires them to synthesize and create and analyze information and connect it to their personal lives in some way rather than just regurgitate it, I would venture to say that what you're getting is true performance.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And in the Q&A box right now, there are just many, many messages of thanks and gratitude, and the reassurance that you've really brought to everyone to be realistic in what they try to do in this virtual environment, and not try to be something they're not, to try out slowly some of the tools, and just very grateful for the practical tips that you shared that are so very, very helpful. I think a lot of this, if you were in their classrooms and virtually the next couple of weeks, you would see a lot of the things you presented being tried out. So thanks so much for that.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, and to every language educator, we also say thank you for all you are doing for your learners today and every day. You know they need you now more than ever, as Lauren certainly reinforced today. Please continue to visit www.actful.org. You will see announcements for additional upcoming webinars that will support you in your work. Thank you for learning with Actful.